Howdy, I suppose we need to do a video today. I mean, just a couple of things have happened with the team.
Nice timing, huh?
And better yet, things have happened here. I mean, look at this.
Yes,
This
brand
is
new couch.
Brand new IKEA?
Oh, yeah.
Who put it together?
Oh, yeah. Steph Klein, digital
Seriously?
producer extraordinaire.
She reads like
She
Norwegian?
built this all by herself.
She built it by herself. How many
Maybe with
pieces
Michael
left
Simeone.
over? All right.
Yeah, right?
All right.
Allen wrenches.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to think you may have been correct about the pillows.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, any sofa that I can sit on and like touch the floor is a good thing.
There you go.
But you're right.
Yeah. Well,
Now, if you missed it, what you did because we weren't rolling, we were getting used to this new set, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with the pillows.
I suggested that she should sit on it. And then she was a little offended because she thought that I was making a short joke, which I wasn't intending to make, but now maybe it turns out actually was probably a pretty good suggestion.
And now that I think about it, I think they actually got us this sofa. This is us specific. Can you imagine Brock sitting in this with his knees up here?
Goodness gracious, it'd be like an airplane. Ugh, he's a giant anyway, so we can move on from that.
We can. Also done some handiwork as far as some of the memorabilia.
Yeah,
and
we sent Segura. They did it. They sent Segura away.
Segura has been sent. I don't think that's what he had in mind.
No, I don't think so either. Is that where we're going to start?
Well, we can start wherever you want. I might ask you to lead this a little bit because after a day yesterday of just nonstop action, not being able to get out of here, surviving on caffeine and office carbs, which I believe you are partially responsible for.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Great cookies, by the way. I know this is the stuff you're interested in. That's why you came to the Mariners video. So we'll get down to business. I think we should start with Jean Segura because it's the freshest in my mind. It's the most recent deal that Jerry Dipoto has made, trading Jean Segura, Juan Nicasio, and James Pazos for my former favorite player who I wanted the Mariners to get for 4 years, Carlos Santana, first baseman DH type, along with J.P. Crawford, former top prospect, who had a cup of coffee in the majors last year, expected to be the Mariners shortstop. What was your reaction when you saw this trade come down?
My reaction was, and what else? When it was coming down, because you looked at the deal and it seemed very one-sided. You expected that if the Mariners were going to take on Santana, that you were going to see additional prospects. And so that was initial reaction, and then you dig into it a little bit more, and I think we knew that Segura was going to get dealt. I think we probably overestimated what the market was for Segura, and I've seen a lot of that on Twitter and a lot of people wondering, well, why couldn't you get more? Well, I think the decision had been made that he was going to be moved for a variety of reasons, and when it came down to it, if you didn't like it, I could ask, would you prefer that Will Myers was here right now and Segura and Leake ended up in San Diego? Because that about seemed to be the market.
And it's interesting because when that rumor came out, that was the first sign Mariners fans really had to say, wait a minute, this guy's got the highest batting average of any shortstop in baseball, and he was an all-star last year, and he's in the peak of his career. He's making less than $20 million compared to a lot of other contracts out there. What's the deal? I mean, that should be one of the most valuable assets in the game. And yet the first rumor, you're right, that we heard was they're going to get the bloated contract of Will Myers back and basically nothing else, and we freaked out. Deal didn't happen. Fast forward to the Phillies deal, and we've got somewhat similar. The players are much better involved coming back to the Mariners than the rumored one with Will Myers. But still, that disconnect remains for a lot of fans. Why Jean Segura, in the prime of his career, who's performed well, is not valued the way that his contract and the way that his performance dictated.
And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. You look at this will be, I believe, his fifth team in Major League Baseball at the Major League level. And I'm going to go ahead and put out ahead of this, I really liked Jean Segura. I enjoyed covering him, but he was a challenge. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed covering him. And he's not a guy that was very consistent in the clubhouse. And I'm just going to take out, I don't think the little mini brawl in the clubhouse really had a ton to do with this. I think that there was kind of an overall picture that had more to do with it. And it's not that there was anything that was overtly bad, but I think the consistency was kind of a big part of that. And we had heard some rumblings before he came to the Mariners from the Diamondbacks that not the best clubhouse guy. And honestly, I didn't really see that. The only thing I saw is a little bit of up and down with him. And if we heard that when he came here, and you add the brawl to it, and you add that Scott Service benched him at the end of the season for not hustling, you also
He laid him out a little bit with some comments that he
laid
made
him
during
out
the
with
season.
the missing a crucial series against the A's with a
Strange quote-unquote infection
bruise
on his arm, etc.
Well, that was actually really nasty.
There
We
were
saw
some
that.
additional rumors around that time that were simultaneously happening with that situation.
Yeah, I think the biggest one though was the calf bruise. How do you take yourself out with a calf bruise? And sometimes a player will think he's doing the right thing. I mean, we've talked about so much. Sometimes it's better to pull back a little than to try and play through something. And I think players sometimes talk themselves into that. But for whatever reason, I think there were too many things. And I think that especially when you're going into a rebuild, you want to set a tone in a clubhouse, and you want to have a tone and a certain sort of player. And I don't think that's the tone that they wanted. And I think that that is absorbed better. And I've said this on the air about Cano, too. And a lot of this isn't Cano's fault. He makes things look easy. Things are easier for him. That doesn't mean everybody else can do that. And sometimes when that guy is there, that can have an impact on the others who are there, particularly if they're young and impressionable. So I think it fell into that a little bit. But because all of that stuff was out there, and also I know that the Mariners were a little concerned about how Segura was going to age. Different body type altogether, especially for a shortstop. Others see that as well. So, and then the market for a shortstop really not that great this offseason. Not too many teams needed them. There's a lot of thought, well, he could be a fallback to Manny Machado. You're kind of rolling the dice there, I think. And I think the Mariners are committed to moving him.
I think of the deals so far that I've seen the Mariners make, this is the one where I am kind of aligned with the fans. I think that the Mariners may have had, in my opinion, a little bit more of a myopic view of Gene Segura than I think some other teams might have. I think that they may have assumed that people understood more about Gene Segura behind the scenes than I believe people would. But I also think, looking back to some of the other deals that Jerry Dipoto has made in the past, he has a tendency to, in my opinion, target specific individuals that he wants in a free agency, not necessarily a type of free agent. For example, the Mariners clearly needed to identify a shortstop of the future. That's one of the things they need. There are a lot of prospects or guys who've just gotten into the league who fit that category of future shortstops and franchise shortstops. I believe that Jerry Dipoto is a little bit more inclined to pick a specific single guy and say, this is the guy, and go out of his way to make sure he gets that guy. And to me, that's kind of what I saw with Crawford. I think he's putting a lot more chips onto this specific guy than maybe I would have if I was rebuilding the Mariners. I probably would have diversified and gotten more lottery ticket type prospects to see if one of them pans out. But I think Jerry Dipoto identified Crawford as the guy that he wanted to be his shortstop of the future. How do you see, and what have you heard about Crawford?
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I think that he was more of a possibility and want somebody that would work than a guy that was specifically targeted. And I do think that the Phillies were pretty much the only team that was willing to deal for Segura. Jeff Sullivan has a piece up on Fangraphs right now that basically says that was the market for Gene Segura, was the Phillies. But that said, something interesting in the deals that we saw in the last day, and we kind of figured out a little bit more about this as the conference calls went on and we talked to people. We did talk to everybody but Santana yesterday, which makes me wonder if he's going to be moving on. And that would be kind of a logical conclusion that they would try and move him. And I think he's pretty movable right now. Although when we heard a little bit more about him, I think he'd be a nice fit for a rebuilding club right now. But when we talked to these guys, we found out that Kelenic was in for a workout right before the draft. Like 2 days before the draft, the Mariners had him in for a workout. He was at the top of the Mariners draft list last year. And they were obviously very high on him. We found out that Dunn was heavily scouted. Tom McNamara had several conversations with him. And then we found out that J.P. Crawford was also on their radar as well. So this is a guy, I mean, they did end up with the young prospects that they got. They were guys that they weren't just looking at recently. These were guys that they tried to get or at least invested heavily in scouting in the draft. So I found that very interesting.
Have you heard anything more about the types of players, the reasons why some of these prospects have been interesting to the Mariners, specifically in the deals they've made here?
I haven't heard about why, but something that really jumps out at me is if you look at, and I've got a post up on my northwest.com right now that takes a look at the farm system a little bit more, and we talked about this in the last podcast. Is that what?
Love it.
The last, okay.
Listen to Shannon with all of her lingo.
Trying.
And
No, it was
vernacular.
yours. I'm trying to remember it at this point. But we talked about the different tiers of prospects
Okay.
that could be coming.
Yeah.
And so, you have the guys right now who are up, and your last Mitch Haniger and Marco Gonzalez are kind of, and throw Justice Sheffield, even though he is still listed as a prospect. If not up at the beginning, he'll be up soon. That's the group that you're building around right now. Kyle Lewis and Evan White, you're hoping they're up by the end of the year. You're hoping they are September call-ups. And they're going to move players quicker now that they've taken this step back. They're not bringing them into a competing team, a team that's fighting for the playoffs, so this is actually a good environment to bring them up when ready. They're not going to rush them, but you would see them sooner than you would if this were any of the last 3 years in the situation that the club was in. And then you look behind that a little bit, and you've got another wave, and you're probably looking at you're looking at some of the more recent. Dunn could be up sooner. Swanson, I think, could be up sooner.
Could be up right away.
Could be up right away. But if you get down to kind of that last level, that last group that is going to come, you're looking at Kellenic and you're looking at Julio Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're talking about guys who are 2 to 4 years away.
And you're hoping 3.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the type of players that both of those guys are, and we've heard about the athletic story about Rodriguez, and he wants to break baseball. He wants to be the next A-Rod, and by that he means A-Rod, broke in when he was 19 and set the baseball world on fire right then and there. Just 17-year-old kid from the Dominican who's making every effort he can to be ready for this, to make a good impression. You see tweets from other players in the Mariners minors with him and talking about him, and even though he's just 17, you can feel the respect for him throughout the organization. So that's exciting right there. And then you've got Kellenic, and on the morning show, Mike Salk is just all over this one and talking to people, and the word on him, baseball obsessed. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, who'd you look up to? Who did you try and pattern your game on, as a kid? And he's only 18 right now too, so I guess still a kid. Bryce Harper, he plays hard. Mike Trout, he plays hard. Robinson Cano, he's so smooth. But he really made an effort to put out plays hard, and that's what we've heard about him. I think those two are what they want this clubhouse to look like. I think they want it to be baseball, baseball, baseball. I think there's a different tone that they want to set. A little more hard-nosed, a little bit more Jim Radish. I think Haniger kind of fits into that, but he's more on the science side and breaking everything down. Not as dynamic as these two young players, but when I look at that kind of last wave that's going to come up, and the other guys that we talked to, the younger guys, you heard a good amount of that too. They just want to come over here and win. And what was really funny is in talking to the guys from the Mets, they sounded pretty happy to be getting out of that organization.
Interesting.
And,
what gave you that impression?
Well, Bruce in particular talked about how, if you slip at all there, you're going to have your detractors in New York. That's how it is. And he was dealing with injuries, and he's had a great history, but it didn't work out for him. Swarzak, you could kind of hear that a little bit too.
I imagine it's tough to be a reliever in New York.
Yeah, I would imagine. Dunn was thrilled. Just want to come over here and win. And, he's relieved a little bit, but he appears to be a starter. Was asked, have they told you what your role is? And he said, I don't care. My role is to come in and help the Mariners win baseball games. Whatever the manager wants me to do, I'm going to do. And those were all very good things to hear on the first day.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess we're working our way back now to the Edwin Diaz-Robinson-Cano trade. Getting back Jay Bruce and Anthony Swarzak as major league contracts. Swarzak's deal is for 1 year. He ends after this season, will be his 1 year with the Mariners at a relatively high $8.5 million contract, if I remember correctly. Jay Bruce under contract for the next 2 seasons, I believe at around $15, $16 million a season. Not a good defensive outfielder at all, but a potential, he can at least play out there, I think kind of like I don't know. It reminds me of Jason Bay a little bit, thinking of Mets outfielders coming from the corner, but Bay's probably a little bit better fielder. And then the Mariners getting back Gerson Batista, a flame-throwing, little control, not a lot of success
could be going
pitcher.
here, could be going
little
there.
Archimedes Caminero 2.0, but there's a chance that there's more there than that, I suppose. And then they get back Justin
going to the
Dunn.
pillow.
Okay, good. Justin Dunn, pitching prospect, one of the top prospects from the Mets. Jared Kelenic, who is, by all accounts, the highest ceiling prospect the Mariners have acquired under Jerry Dipoto, in my opinion. It may be the highest ceiling prospect they've acquired since Kyle Lewis before he blew out his knee. So I think it's an interesting move, as well as getting back Eric Swanson, who is a reliever, starter, swing man. They're going to hope that he's ready quickly. He's performed really well in the minors, not necessarily considered a big prospect, but he's always performed well. So given that and what you understand, the Mariners send $20 million of salary relief in that deal to the Mets. What was your general reaction when you heard about this deal, when you saw it come down?
No, not Edwin.
So you were attached. You weren't too excited about moving Edwin Diaz.
No. Hey, I'm there every day, and you have to detach yourself. In this job, you can't be a fan, but that doesn't kind of take away the part where, well, I enjoy seeing this person every day. It's like coming into work here, and if all of a sudden, Howdy, they pulled you, they pulled Taylor, they pulled Salk, they pulled Brock,
soon.
they pulled,
Don't worry.
everybody
They'll find
out.
a way to get rid of me pretty soon. They're going to watch
Yeah.
what these videos have to say, and I'm out.
There we go. There we go. So, I mean, for that, that's how it is initially for me. That's my workplace for 7 months out of the year. So there's kind of a bummer aspect to that. Plus, I couldn't say enough good things about Edwin Diaz. He is as solid a young player as I've ever seen come through this organization, and just what he does on and off the field, just an incredible kid. As a person and as a ball player, he's up at the top. So it hurt to lose that. I understand. Everybody wanted to see some sort of rebuild, how important, they were very focused on how important it was to move Diaz. The reliever is less reliable. I get all of that, but my initial reaction was not Edwin. My second reaction about the whole trade was, way to go, Jerry. Way to go. You've got to get out from under that contract of Robinson Cano.
Tell me more. Why do you feel like that was such a priority? It was clearly a priority. Why was it such a priority now for a rebuilding team?
Well, how many times have we looked at, can they go get this guy, can they go get that guy, and you look at that salary projecting out another, over the last couple of years, it was 6 years, 5 years, 7 years. How can you look at that and not see how that is a hindrance? I think that, we've talked a little bit about this, but at the end of last year, it was evident Robinson was not interested in being anything but a second baseman. And that was going to be problematic. But bigger than that, is you knew when that deal was signed that the value would not be on the back end of that contract. And I think it's actually, the situation has gotten worse with what we have seen in free agent valuations over starting last season. And all of a sudden, Robinson's value is that much less. And my feeling was this was their last best chance to move that contract.
So if they didn't make this move, they weren't able to move Robinson Cano this year, the likelihood is the Mariners end up eating all of the money, or basically all of it, just to make him go away, or sitting with that guy for a long term. And it sounds like they weren't totally thrilled with him being on the team anymore and being a part of it, based on where his age and skill set, positional fit, et cetera, moved forward.
It wasn't a good fit. It was not a good fit anymore. And I think that, a little bit of what I said with Gene Segura too, and setting that tone. And I don't blame Robbie. Robbie needs to be who Robbie is. But only Robbie can do that. And if that's the example and others are trying to do that, I can see how that can be problematic. And for that reason, I think he does belong on a team that is going to be contending. I think he does. Obviously the bigger market is something that he enjoys and can handle, and I think it's a good fit for the Mets. But I don't think it was going to come around again. And, Brody Van Wagenen was not the brand new GM of the Mets, who needed to make a splash, who just so happens to know Robinson Cano inside out. He negotiated the deal with the Mariners. I'm not sure there would have been another chance to do this.
Interesting. So I guess the big controversy that's come out of this deal and also the Gene Segura deal we've kind of touched on, but let's have a real explicit conversation. Did the Mariners make it more of a priority, or I guess too much of a priority, to cut salary as a part of this rebuild versus acquiring talent?
Why is that a bad thing if those dollars are coming off and are going to be spent on the back end of this?
I think that's a huge, important point to make. And it's one of the hardest things, I think, for a fan to look at and say, you're saving money now, and we're going to have to watch this team not be any good. And I don't have any assurances and promises that you're going to spend that money in the future. For all I know, you're just going to be happy to lose games, get a little less money at the gate, but you're going to sit on saved money and salary. So you're essentially asking people to trust that ownership is going to do right by the fan base and say the money we would have spent we're going to hang on to, and we will spend it when the time comes. I think it's tough to trust and believe, but if that truly is what happens, if the Mariners would have rolled out a $160 million payroll for this next season, but instead are going to roll out $80 million, can you earmark $80 million or account for some losses? Can you earmark $60 million and expect them to spend that over your window? I mean, I think that's the standard now that you have to hold it to, but I suppose until I see that, the question's going to remain. Did they try to just save money so that it wouldn't be as hard to lose?
Well, first of all, you don't know that anything else was offered for Segura in
Another
particular.
really difficult
you
part.
have no idea. And I mean, there was word that came out today that the Mets swung the deal when they did because they were trying to keep Diaz away from the Phillies. And there was also word that the Phillies had, something swung for, or not swung, but there were talks for a Segura-Diaz combo trade with the Mariners, and pulled that back. And that the Mariners, were pushing for more with the Phillies with the deal that they did make and didn't get it. You also know that a lot of folks in New York aren't happy with the deal and thought they came out on the short end of the stick. So I'm not quite sure how much more. I mean, it's easy to say that you're selling yourself short or you're trying to save dollars, but yes, there's value in those dollars. There is value in having those dollars on the back end. And Dipoto said, when it comes around, when this team is ready to go, then we can hopefully spend those dollars the way that we want to spend on free agents, and that is finishing a team, not building a team. And they took on significant salary. I mean, right now their payroll for this year is setting at $144. That's $10 million less than what they opened last season with. That is going to go down next year and the years after, but still, they still got almost around $100 million starting
we'll see what ends up
point
happening,
next
but
year. So I don't know that it's going to be dollar for dollar, but I do know that payroll has not been the big issue with this team. They have spent. It's how they've spent it. And that they have been, I think they were 8th in opening day salaries last year. They've been in the top 10 or around the top 10 for some time now. They've spent on payroll. So it would be hard for me to imagine that they wouldn't, 2 years from now when they get going again. And there are things that they're taking a risk in taking this step back. It's going to be a hard sell. They're going to lose attendance. A lot of payroll comes from attendance. So how they balance that, we don't know. Jerry did address that a little bit, and that, those dollars should be there when it's time to spend it. We don't know. But the idea that you can just go out and buy prospects, it's a nice one. I don't know how available that was to them, and people will say, well, you should have waited and traded.
The winter
Gene
meetings
Segura.
are coming up in 5 days, which are typically a hotbed for transactions.
Well,
no,
they know what the market was. They've known what the market is for a while. You had the general meetings at the beginning of November, the general manager meetings, at the beginning of November. Jerry has talked with everyone. The Yankees deal that people thought that he didn't spend enough time with, that was worked on for over a month. And that doesn't mean just talking to the Yankees. He's talking to other clubs as well. So he knows what was out there. Segura, I believe they said it took about, or not the Segura, the Diaz-Cano took about 3 weeks. It was a surprise for him. He himself said he was surprised that they were able to move Robinson and that there was an offer there for that. So I don't think in that regard it's going to be dramatically different. I think they know what that market was. The only thing that might have been different was if there was an injury to somebody early in spring training or something like that, if you're talking about a trade deadline deal, and those deals are different because at that point you can't go out and buy a player, you don't have that option, but when there are free agents out there and that is an option, you're kind of competing against that as well. So I get what people are saying about that, but my final two things are you don't know what was available, and you can't not assign value to the dollars that they are getting back.
Yes, I totally agree with everything that you said. I do think that it's important to couch that the Mariners are asking in your evaluation of this deal, they're essentially asking for your trust, that they are doing what's best for the organization, not their own interests financially. And I think that's going to be proven. So if you want a salary cap watchdog, if you want a payroll watchdog, you can follow me at BoyHowdy ESPN because I will be a payroll watchdog and counting the amount of money that generally I think they're saving. Because I think that is an important thing. The way that the economics of baseball have shifted in the last 3 years, really since this last collective bargaining agreement that was signed between the players' union and the owners, it's changed a lot, and it's actually moved a lot more towards how NFL teams are operating their salaries. So I am really curious to see if the Mariners are willing to open the purse strings for a 3-year window starting in 2021 to 2024 and truly be one of the 5 top spending teams in baseball, because that's the type of money that they'll be able to sustain that model for 3 years. So I'll be really curious to see as that time comes around.
Top 5 is pretty heady for a team that's not a major market team.
Well, it is, except for the fact that you were top 10 and you're going to save it.
How much are you saving, though? I mean, I'm just, this year you're not.
Yet. I will be surprised if they're spending more than $120 million on this team by the time it starts.
We'll see. But then also the hits that you're going to take in attendance, that's part of it.
You'll take some, but you're going to get
hits
some
that
new
you're probably
money
going to take in advertising, too.
Yeah, you're going to get some new money from the naming rights. You're getting a better deal.
Oh, well, you're not.
You're getting some money from places. Major League Baseball's
you saying you're going to get more
media,
than what they got on it?
The Fox deal that's coming in from National Major League Baseball is a greater benefit to them than it was in the past. There are streams of revenue that are going to offset quite a bit of this.
Yeah, but when everybody's getting the same dollars, that just takes the entire floor up.
Theoretically, because there will be some teams who will sit on that money and pocket it, because there are bad owners in this game. There will be teams that will sit on that money and say, we don't have the extra money to spend, and they'll have general, slow, incremental increases of 2% to 3% every year.
No,
but there will be some teams who will spend that
they're part of that
money.
floor and have always done that. So that I don't think that generally changes the landscape. What that does is that brings up free agent prices.
Yeah, for a lot of veteran players. This is a much bigger conversation than most of you are interested in hearing right now. So as time go on and the Mariners have some difficult times, we'll get into a real deep conversation about the economics of baseball with this. But there are some other moves that have been happening here.
Well, let's just really quick. I mean, I ran this by you and what the farm system looks right now. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to actually see a farm system ranking. Now, overall, it doesn't mean a ton to me because I think you look at it and I think a lot of the farm system rankings are just basically, very heavily skewed towards your top prospects. Although there is, Fangraphs has one where they have the actual valuations of players in their dollars and their WAR dollars. The Mariners dead last in that right now, but they will jump up considerably with what they have done right now. But the first thing I did was I put it all out on a chart to see what that looks like now as opposed to what it did before, just for the visual. And all of a sudden that farm system is looking a lot better, particularly your top 10 prospects, which now your top 6 prospects are all first-round picks. Number 7 is Julio Rodriguez, if you're going with MLB Pipeline. It's a very different list than when you were looking at it, and you had Boog Powell on it, and DJ Peterson, and Luis Liberato.
Yes.
Liberato.
You had a lot of flawed prospects. That was one of the harder parts about the top end of the Mariners.
And there are no guarantees about any of the prospects that are on it right now.
But those prospects are guys
just
that the league
taking a look at it,
yeah.
And it looks vastly different.
Yes. They have a much better top end of the farm system than they'd had. To me, as I had looked at the farm system since Jerry Dipoto had been here, they had all their chips in on 1 or 2 players, turning out to be everything that they were billed to be, and just hoping that somebody else outperforms their projections. That's what their system was before. Now, the Mariners are in much more of a traditional style of farm system where you have highly regarded athletes and highly regarded prospects who have a diverse skill set that hopefully you can depend on them growing in all of those aspects or a few of them to an elite level. that's where you really find good prospects, when you can count on a guy to really start to, his ceiling is low, or his ceiling is high and his floor is higher. And the Mariners had been traditionally looking for prospects who had high floors and low ceilings. They're not going to break the world. They're not going to break the internet.
Not going to break
They're not going to break
baseball.
baseball. But they may make the show in a year or two and be serviceable, and hopefully they figure something out with their launch angle and become amazing. It's not what they have now. They have real talent that is expected to be good.
On that note, on the launch angle note,
There's always something on the launch angle note.
Tim Laker. Did you look into him at all?
The Mariners' new hitting coach?
Yeah.
I haven't looked in much. All I know is he's D. Gordon's longtime coach, right?
No, that's Perry Hill. All right, now we got to just start all over again.
All right, so tell me the importance of Tim Laker, who is not Perry Hill, who has nothing to do with D. Gordon.
Remember Chris Taylor?
Yeah, I remember Chris Taylor.
JD Martinez, you've heard about him.
Okay.
You know about the Dodgers guru who sits up on the mountain and the samurai baseball launch angle godfather of?
Yes.
That's who Tim Laker hangs out with in the offseason. and
Oh,
works with.
okay. He's the Padawan.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yep.
he's the launch angle guy. He's going to
he's-
turn the entire farm system into a bunch of line drive hitters.
Well, in his words, he bellies in driving the baseball, which
Okay,
Mitch
that makes
Haniger will
sense to
love
me.
that. All guys just
I
want to
believe in
drive
driving
the
the
baseball. They
baseball
all
as
just
well,
want to
actually.
drive the baseball. But
Good, yes.
let's go outside and try.
We should drive the
Let's go
baseball.
try.
If there's one thing we could do, let's drive
drive
it.
the baseball.
Yeah,
but,
we want to spin it when we're pitching too, so.
You know, it's just one of those things where if you're looking Tim Laker, well, yeah, he had a nice journeyman career for a long time and just not inspiring. And the whole, well, hitting coaches really don't have that much to do with, basically let's throw a soft toss to them, put in a word here or there. But what really kind of jumped out at me about the hire there is, and DePoto's talked about this for about 2 years, is it would be great if you could bring in everything that the guys are getting on the outside. And we're talking about the performance centers that they're going to, the technology that they're using, and it's on both the pitching and the hitting end. But he's kind of got that experience in that he has worked with guys, that he has worked with the guy that is highly in demand in the off season by a lot of big league hitters, and it's a little bit different approach. Came from the Diamondbacks, assistant hitting coach there. He also mentioned that he was down, the Mariners had one of their hitting camps down in Peoria where they had the younger prospects, your Julio Rodriguez's and
Are these the hitting
Evan
summits that they
White's.
started when they first got
yeah,
started?
it's a little bit different. It's a younger, yeah, it is different. The summit was just 3 or 4 days. This is a camp that goes for a few weeks.
Okay.
And in addition to the work that they do on hitting, if I've got this right, they spend the entire morning on conditioning and different aspects of that. They actually don't do too much hitting. There's a little bit, and I'm probably merging 2 different camps together. But they also have things off the field that they do too in community service and whatnot. So it's where they take their top younger prospects, non-pitching prospects, and basically keep them going. And I think that this is instead of some of the Arizona things that younger prospects normally do. They've taken it all in-house, and they do a lot of things with the technology that hitters get in the performance centers. Tim Laker went down to that, and he said that he was fired up by what he saw, and that you had this group of young players from the organization, different levels, and there was a very definite hitting philosophy, he said, and there was something, he said it was consistent throughout the different coaches that he talked to, and something he said you could look at a hitter and know it was a Mariner hitter down there.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I've wanted to, ever since Jerry DePoto has arrived here and talked about what he wants to do developmentally, I want to get to the point where players come up and you see that Mariner stamp on them, that Mariner imprint. They do this. This is how the Mariners do this. And it was interesting to hear Laker volunteer that he was down there and he saw that and he said it's not like that in most organizations. And he's been around, he would know that kind of thing. What that translates into, I don't know, but it's something worth watching, potentially exciting. We'll see.
Yeah, we haven't yet really seen a Mariners hitting prospect that's come through their system
Yeah, no.
all the way. And with as much churn over of the roster that they've had on every level of the organization, I imagine that's been a tough thing for them to identify and prove that it works so far. So this will be an interesting next couple of years for as long as they give Jerry Dipoto and staff to play this out to see if it makes a difference at the major league level.
And shouldn't they be bringing these guys up now instead of trading them? I mean, I'm sure there will be some trades, but the idea is to grow your own players.
At this point.
That doesn't mean you have to draft them. You
Right.
can bring them in. But that's something I would like to see, too. There's been a lot of minor leaguers traded over the last 3 years. And you just don't have that identity, and you know that to sustain, you need to grow your own and have a thriving farm system. So I'll be interested to see. You hope that what he was doing, and he being Dipoto in the first 3 years, is what he had to do. That was what he had to trade. That is basically the currency that he had to make deals and bring in talent. But they think highly of this group. I'd like to see him stick around for a while.
One big final topic as we wrap this up that is going to encompass the time until the season starts, unless it happens before that. The winter meetings come up on Sunday. They start on Sunday. Mitch Haniger is still here.
I knew you were going there.
The case for and against trading Mitch Haniger.
No, not Haniger.
You got rid of Diaz for Shannon. Can you at least hang on to Haniger for her? The case for keeping Haniger around. What would you say is the case for keeping Mitch Haniger now?
The case is that he should still be in his prime. He's a late bloomer, but he should still be in his prime when this thing is ready to go. He should be leading that team. I mean, he was, a top 10 MVP candidate this year? I think you want that, and I think that is something that can sustain, and I think that we have been around Mitch long enough to know that he's still doing this right now, or at the very least doing this.
At a top level.
At a top level. So I'm not letting go of him. Also, when I talked about the profile of players that you want, this is what you want as Mariners, he's it. He's a good example to have in that clubhouse.
So in 2 to 3 years, he'll be in the final year of arbitration, right around that time. So
or
he'll
they've
still
signed
be
him
under
to an
control, or they've
extension.
signed him to an extension, a long-term deal. So the case for is that he would be your best player, one of the best players in baseball, at a leadership position on a team that's ready to contend, still in his prime. That would be the case for. What is the case against keeping Mitch Haniger around?
Well, obviously, it's how much you could bring in. And I think the only way that you move him now is if you do get that haul. You have to win that trade. I think that you look at the trade with the Mets, I think that was a good trade, particularly with the flexibility that they get. They love the prospects that they got. I've heard good things about them. With the Haniger deal, there's no question. You have to win that trade. And I don't think that's going to be easy for another organization to do. We've talked about what the free agent market has been the last couple of years. The trade market, teams are holding on to their young players. They are holding on to their prospects. I think there's a higher premium on those players right now. And I don't know that you could get that blow me away even with Mitch Haniger right now.
Okay. So if the Mariners do end up trading Mitch Haniger, do you think it would be sooner in the offseason or later in the offseason?
Sooner. Because it would be that would have such impact on both organizations.
Yeah.
And again, they all know where they're at and what they need. And I don't really see a team, mid-January going, you know what we really need? We need Mitch Haniger a month out from spring training.
So how much impact does Bryce Harper and Manny Machado have on Mitch Haniger?
I don't think they do. I don't think he's a fallback.
See, now there's my thing that I could potentially see is, think of an owner like Mike Ilitch. Bad example right now because the Tigers are terrible.
But he's no longer.
And he's no longer with us. But Mike Ilitch was notorious with the Tigers for saying, I don't care what it costs. I want this. I want more. I want these type of players. Steinbrenner, another example, but it was such a blanket cast. And so Mike Ilitch, that's the kind of ownership. To me, I could see an owner saying,
Ryan Storff.
Look, I thought Machado was my guy. I wanted that. I needed the marquee piece. I think we're one star away. That's the guy I want. And they come up short and they say, I'm not leaving this offseason. I'm not leaving my team out there when I know we're one piece away. do what it takes to get me a superstar level player. And this guy comes along with some financial flexibility that other guys won't have as well. So I'd be curious to keep an eye on something like that.
I don't think they package Mitch with a player to move him.
And that's another suggestion that's been thrown out. Can you move Kyle Seager's entire salary?
I
if you
don't think
put
that
Mitch
would be
Haniger
worth
with
it, to
him?
be honest with you. And Kyle Seager's entire salary is more than most believe.
Yeah, it's like $17 and $19 million for the next 3 seasons.
The final year is an option, and if he's traded, it becomes a player option.
Yeah.
There's an additional year on that contract that most people have overlooked when they see that. So if he's moved, it's basically an additional year. So I think that is a tougher one. I think Kyle has got an opportunity to rebound, and I think he is more of a trade deadline type, and I think you can live with him if he's not able to turn it around enough to be traded. But I don't, you've already paired Edwin Diaz with a player, and I'm not convinced that dramatically pulled back a prospect or lowered the level. I didn't see an organization giving up 3 top picks for Edwin Diaz. They got 2 of the Mets' top 10 picks, 3 in this market with how they value their picks right now. I don't see that. I don't see 3.
Let me ask you this, though, on that tangent. Would the Mets have traded for Cano just for Jay Bruce, $20 million, and Anthony Swarzak? Do you think they would have pulled the trigger on that deal?
I don't know.
I tend to think not.
Well,
I tend to think the Mariners would have had to throw in $60 million more salary to make that deal work.
yeah, but I don't think they got less because they added Diaz in, or significantly less because they added Diaz in.
To me, I think they saved quite a bit of money on that deal by including Edwin Diaz. Everything that I had heard leading up to these trades with Cano was that the Mariners were going to have to eat at least half of that salary.
Yeah, but
That's
that
what
was
I
before
heard.
Brody Van Wagenen was a part of this.
Yeah, so now we're left with, did the Mariners fleece the Mets, get something from them that no one was willing
What
to
they
get?
believe in that market, that is what is kind of being thrown around in that market. So, but my point being, I don't believe there was a package out there. I think if you look at it as 2 separate trades, I don't think there was a package out. I don't think there was a deal for Edwin that was dramatically different than what they got on the prospect end of that trade.
Interesting. And we'll never know the answer.
Well, you will. I think you kind of will. You talk about Paxton. Well, was there something else out there that was better? We've heard this thing in the past. You only have to go back to the Taijuan Walker deal, and there were other organizations going, wait, he was available? I didn't know. We would have liked to have bid on this. I haven't heard any rumblings around any of these with what was done.
Yeah, those few rumblings that I'd heard was that the industry had believed that if Edwin Diaz was traded on his own, he had more value.
That's what they believe, but Jerry Dipoto has talked to everybody in the industry. We heard the Phillies pulled a deal back. How much more have you heard about that?
Yeah, I don't imagine you're going to hear any more
And
about
I think
that.
you forget that, for the same reasons why you would let him go, everybody knows that too. Relievers are volatile. You know that. So I don't, I stand by, and until I hear something to the contrary, and I'll have the opportunity to, I don't think it was dramatically different than what they would have gotten. I do not do that with Haniger because you've already moved Diaz.
Getting back to the core of it, Mitch Haniger, as we wrap up here, you're in the camp that keeping Haniger is the right move right now for this organization?
Unless you are truly, without a question, blown away by the deal and you win that trade. And if everything that you just said, even if that owner is out there, not every organization could put together a package.
Right. Yeah. I am of the camp that you're not wrong either way, but the longer you keep a player, to me, I'm a cynic and a pessimist. You run the greater risk that that player performs worse and their value goes down. So to me, if it was up to me, I would trade Mitch Haniger this offseason.
At some point, you got to put a team together and run with them, though.
I'll do that when I got $100 million to spend and all the top prospects in baseball.
You're in it for the
I'll
5-year rebuild if you're doing that.
I'm in it for the 3 to 5 years. Let's do it. Let's have truly an inarguable top 3 most talented team in baseball and spend to supplement it. That's where I am.
There's still a big roll of the dice right there.
Absolutely is.
Still, it's a bigger roll of the dice right there.
Huge
if you
roll of
trade
the
a guy
dice.
like Haniger.
Yeah, but
I think we can agree that you have to be blown away by that deal.
Yeah, you can't take it for pennies on the dollar. You can't take a bargain deal on that move. He's your biggest chip left. You haven't had a chip that big in a long time. You got to capitalize on that trade if you make it.
And you're still with us. We're not trading you, even though I had that scenario out there that we
Well, I
walk
don't know.
in. And
After this whole episode, I can imagine that I'm on the block.
can I
So,
point this out right now? We do have an addition to the set here, and it wasn't 17. But
no,
you had the Huskies
no,
winning
it
the
was
Apple
only,
Cup by
what,
17-11, I
Yeah,
think, or
I think it was
14.
14.
Still very good, very impressive.
Yeah, tooting the horn segment. We should end with tooting your own horn.
Not about starting, but we might lose some viewers if we did that.
yeah,
We don't
we're
need
gonna
to anger the Cougs before that. But
Toot your own horn. I'll go with the we's here. We predicted a Husky victory by 17 points. Turned out to be 14. Apologize for that. Toot your own horn. We predicted that Robinson Cano would be traded. Toot your own horn. It's happened since then. I don't have a prediction for you. Do you have a prediction for this next time? Because we're rolling.
well, Jerry says he's going to be quiet until
The winter
winter
meetings in 5
meetings.
days.
Which, yeah, all right, thanks, Jerry. Prediction. No. I'm not sure what happens. Obviously, Segura and Haniger are the two big names that you watch right now. I don't know what happens with them.
I don't know what happens either, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Mariners creatively find a way to move on from Kyle Seager. That's going to be my prediction moving forward.
All right, then.